struggled a little bit with rail, but we spent a lot of time and effort with transit, buses, commuter lines, that kind of thing, and of course automobiles, but also bike, ped modes, anything that surface transportation, and any project that spends federal funding for surface transportation needs to go through an approval process and a planning process with their local Metropolitan Planning Organization. So as you think ahead and think, federal funding may be a source of money for a project you have in mind, at some point you're going to be talking with an MPO before that becomes a reality. We are federally mandated. There's specific rules and instructions of what MPOs can do and how they're structured in the federal legislation. The overall mandate is that we provide continuous, cooperative, and comprehensive transportation planning in our communities. We also have, we're federally funded, and we do work with our partner agencies in doing a number of analysis and studies and such. MPOs are found in any urbanized area in the United States with a population of 50,000 or more. There's about 420 of them nationwide as of the census, the last census, and 182 of them are TMAs, which is the larger MPOs, which have some additional requirements in the work that they do in the federal legislation. Some areas of 50,000 or more are combined. If they're adjacent to each other, you often find MPOs are regional in nature, and if you have two municipalities of 50,000 or more that are next to each other, you will often find that they are part of one single MPO. Real example, just to show the map, in New York State, we have 14 MPOs. I'm the one in red there, in the middle of the state, that's Tompkins County. And I'm the smallest one in New York State. And our largest one, of course, is New York City. And we have an association, statewide association, that's very effective. Unfortunately, not a lot of states have associations like ours. Kind of give you a single place where you can kind of get in touch with all the MPOs at once. But we're pretty proud of having the association we have and the way we've been able to work together, and with the state DOT and the federal highways partners and federal transit too. MPOs are generally structured as with a policy committee. That's the ultimate decision-making body. Policy committee normally has chief elected officials as part of their membership, mayors, town supervisors, and such. There's also representation from the state DOT, the transit agencies that may be in the area, and often federal highway and federal transit are involved. Like in my case, we're pretty remote, so we don't get the presence there, but they're informed of everything we do, and we do communicate pretty regularly. Planning committee is usually made up of engineers and planners from the different partner agencies that are involved, and they provide technical review and recommendations to the policy committee. Of course, they're all supported by a staff. In my case, I'm the director of the MPO in my agency, and I have a small staff. MPOs can range from a staff of 1 to a staff of 60 in the larger MPOs. It just depends on size and complexity. And we often have advisory committees or a variety of citizen advisory committees, ad hoc committees, et cetera, to help with what we call the metropolitan planning process, this whole process that we need to go through. The federal legislation requires, and by the way, does everybody hear me okay? Okay. Federal legislation requires that we provide 20-year planning. So we have what's called either a metropolitan transportation plan or a long-range transportation plan that looks out 20 years into the future. Often this plans are scenario-based. They don't have to be. The last federal legislation required that plans include what they call performance measures. So every MPO is, most of them probably already have them developed, have a set of performance measures for transportation that their plan, the implementation of the plan is supposed to lead to improvements in those performance measures. The long-range plan is the basis of what we do, and we have two other documents in red here, or brown. I'm colorblind. The TIP, the 4 or 5 year Transportation Improvement Program, is a very important document. It is sort of the teeth of our agency. This is where actual dollars are assigned to specific projects on particular dates for specific phases of the project. So, you know, that is where sort of the proverbial rubber hits the ground, and that's where the money is shown in the Transportation Improvement Program. That will include again, anything that has federal funding for surface projects, and transit, highway bridge, safety, mobility, bike ped, and it can be, and there's already the word silo has been mentioned. There's a lot of sources of funding that are siloed. You know, there's transit money for transit and highway money for highway, but there's a lot of complexity there. There is some highway money that's available for transit. We often use transit money for safety and mobility type projects. So there's, you know, there's ways of manipulating the system, should we say, or using the regulations to our advantage. I suggest, you know, when you have a project, you know, there's a lot of opportunities, but also, it's also sort of formula funds that are allocated to MPOs based on their population, lane miles, etc. But there are also things like Tiger grants, which many of you may have heard about for transportation. Those monies end up in the TIP. Earmarks from congressional earmarks, which are a little more scarce now than they used to be, they also end up in the TIP. Again, anything that's federal money for surface transportation will end up there. An important document. What's called the UPWP, the Unified Planning Work Program. I don't know where they came up with that one. Anyways, the UPWP is basically an annual work program. That's where my salary, my pencils and pens and computers are located. But it's also a place where if MPOs that are larger may have a little more resources, they can do studies and such out of there, which may be a place where if you want to do an initial feasibility study for a new technology, PRT, and anything, this may be a place to consider finding resources. I will tell you that in the MPO world, things are pretty tight right now. I've been in my MPO for 18 years. I started in 98. In 1998, we had $50 million for our 5-year TIP, okay, in 1998 dollars. We're updating our TIP sort of as we speak, and I have $20 million available in 2015 dollars. Okay, so it's you know, less than half of the money. It's a really tight environment. Our UPWP, basically the funding for my operations have been flat for the last 8 to 10 years. So we're trying to do the same with less, never mind do more with less. So it's a challenging time, and you know, we can only hope that the congressional actions towards reauthorization of the new transportation bills will be positive and will put the resources where they're needed in transportation. So I want to talk a little bit about the fun stuff that we did with PRT in Ithaca. Real quick, Tompkins County and the Ithaca urbanized area, we're pretty small. As a county, we have 105,000 people. My MPO is county-wide in scope as far as the planning that it does. Other MPOs are multi-county. Bigger MPOs are multi-county. They may be multi-state if they're near a border. And like I say, the size and form of the MPO in the planning area has to do more with the size and shape of the urbanized area that is its main population center. In my case, it's a nice, tidy package. We have the city in the middle of the county. Our urbanized area is 55,000, so we're just above the threshold of 50,000. 28,300 of them are college students, so we are the quintessential college town. In the summertime, we look a lot different than we do during the rest of the year. We are a regional employment center. We bring in about 15,000 people a day, which may not be a big number in a lot of places. For us, it's pretty huge. It's over a third of our employment population comes from outside the county and commutes into Tompkins County every day. So that's one of the sort of challenges that we have that we need to deal with as we do our work. There are a number of sort of key fundamental challenges that led to us looking at PRT as a possibility in our community. We have a problem with congestion like everybody else. We have one of the things that I'm happy with is an interest in densifying the urbanized area, and I think people get it that you need more people living in the city, and that makes transit and biking and walking and everything much more feasible if you have a vibrant urban area. And we have this challenge of connecting the downtown with the two colleges. We have Cornell University and Ithaca College, and they create a lot of activity. You saw the numbers of the population. So we want those folks, the students and faculty, to have an easy way to get downtown and vice versa, so there's more vibrancy in our community and for economic development reasons and so on. So my main role in this whole PRT effort was to bring these three people together, a land developer, an architect, and a community activist, into a room. And I remember the meeting. There were only about 8 people there. And in that meeting, I kind of told them, have you guys heard about PRT as a technology? And they just loved it. And they took off with it. These guys were and are, visionaries, high-energy people. And they became the champions for this effort. Together, they created a company called Connect Ithaca. And they promoted the idea, made presentations before civic leaders, kind of explored the concept and its feasibility in a kind of unofficial way. And then finally they got money from NYSERDA. NYSERDA is a New York State Energy Research Development Authority. It's a creature of New York State. Other states may have other places where you can find grant money to explore interesting ideas. We're lucky to have NYSERDA, and they're willing to spend money on exploring concepts and ideas. So they got money for the study, and they hired a consultant, and they did a consultant-based study. It's from 2010. At that time, they prepared a pretty comprehensive study of what's going on in PRT at that time. They provided a description of the concept, and then they looked up close at what an application would look like in Ithaca. Talked about the technical feasibility, costs, ridership, potential routes, etc. This map that's in the study, Cornell University is sort of on the top right over there near where College Town is. Ithaca College is in the bottom middle. The downtown is, where it says downtown. And those are the 3 main points that you want to find connections. The outcome of the study, I think everybody realized, we weren't in a position to go out and hire somebody to bring this technology in, that it was going to be a much longer process. We talked about having Ithaca become some sort of academic and research hub for PRT. We felt we had a good place to do demonstration or having a pilot implementation of some sort. We have varied topography, four-season weather. We get snow, rain, and ice, which is good for testing things, make sure it works in all conditions. We had willing landowners for private applications, and we're a pretty compact area, so we felt we didn't need many, many miles of track to make something, to study something we could, that would help cut costs if we just had a more compact area. But we also found no takers at that time, and this being a sort of a civic effort being led by these three champions, after they did the study and they tried to shop this idea around and try to get some sort of buy-in, and it didn't happen, the effort kind of imploded a little bit. And people had to go on with their lives, and it stopped. And that's sort of where we are. A few of the things we learned, we need top-down support, particularly in a small area. The technology, the implementation, the costs, everything is just too big to expect a place like Ithaca or many other cities to say they're going to be funding it themselves with their own tax dollars. The reality is that, I think back then, this application was estimated at, a total about $250 million. And those are sort of unheard of monies in a place like Ithaca. So we would need federal support, state support, and local support. And so we need champions at all different levels to make something like this work. So let me try to wrap up with some observations that I have. A concern that I have is that automated transportation networks and PRT remains a non-option when considering projects funding. Basically, I'm talking about when people say we have a problem and people talk about solutions, PRT and ATN just still does not come up. Okay, so it's not recognized, or not some of it's not recognized. It's not known. So I think there's an education need here. I think it's important, it's, I think, critical, certainly from the MPO perspective, that ATN and PRT language be included in the federal transportation legislation. I mean, this technology needs to be defined, and I need permission to spend my time and effort and money in this technology. And right now, I mean, I looked at the federal legislation for it, and I found sort of this obtuse and secondary definition that, if you look at it the right way, could be used for PRT. It needs to be much more specific, I think, and there's a challenge to add language to federal legislation, but I think it's a challenge that it's an important one. Again, certainly from my perspective and the MPO perspective. Again, the idea of selling it, talking up ATN, PRT, its potential, its possibilities. There's a product here that does capture the imagination. I think when people learn about it, they can think of places where it can be used and it could be a real option. Just an anecdote. In 2009, so it's important that the message, that there's a good message and what public perception is of this technology. In 2009, NPR had a report on PRT, and it was all about hope and opportunity. That's sort of what you get out of it. In 2015, about a month ago, I turned on the radio and whoop, there it is. There's a report on NPR. And what I got out of it when it ended, the thought that was left in my head, and maybe it's because, I don't know, it's just me, was that PRT is a technology whose time has come and gone. Now with automated cars and shared services, it's no longer the thing. So I was, troubled when I heard that. I mean, I knew I was coming here, I was going to be talking, and I don't want to be bearer of bad news, but, this is a message, and so there's a PR component to everything that's going on in this industry, and it's an important one. Sort of already touched on this, but the idea of finding allies, searching strategic allies in leadership and decision-making at the federal and the state level, the federal level, finding those legislators or assistants to legislators, the staffers who will bring language into legislation. In the private sector, of course, that funding is needed, finding corporate leaders. And in the public sector, not forgetting, the state level and the local levels, and there's a lot of potential allies there. I think the planning community, mobility managers can see this stuff as this tech work that we do with PRT and ATN as real potential solutions to the problems they have. Certainly there's a sustainability aspect to it, and I believe that with the right angle, existing transit can be an ally also. I will stop there. I thank you for your time, and I don't know if there'll be an opportunity for questions, but be happy to do it. Thank you.